So if you remember back to first grade when you were first learning to add, maybe you used a number line to do so. So when we add 3 plus 5, in actuality, we start at 0, which just happens to be the origin, and we move 3 units in the positive direction. And then from the 3, we're going to add another positive 5. So in other words, we're going to move 5 more units in the positive direction, and we end up at positive 8. So when you added in first grade and using the number line, you went in the direction of the sign. Even though we didn't call it positive 3 and positive 5, you went in the positive direction as many units as are called out for. So 3 plus 5 equals 8. Alright, not too bad. So when you are adding integers, just remember that one thing is true. So just like you did in kindergarten, first grade, using the number line, without even knowing it, you were using the number line and you were moving in the direction of the integer sign, so the positive or the negative, when you are adding. So once again, you just want to make sure you move in the direction of the sign when adding on the number line. So when you add a positive 3 and a positive 5, you go in the positive direction on the number line because we're adding, and we end up at a positive 8. Let's remember this example for later. Here's another look at adding integers on the number line. And again, don't forget, when adding integers, move in the direction of the sign. So I have a negative 2 plus a negative 3. So once again, we're going to start at 0 because that is the origin. We're going to move 2 units in the negative direction. Negative direction this way, positive direction this way. So we move 2 units in the negative direction first. There's our negative 2. Then to that we add a negative 3. So we go 1, 2, 3 more units in the negative direction. We end up at a negative 5. So to review, when adding integers, you move in the direction of the sign. I added a negative 2, I went 2 units in the negative direction. I added a negative 3, I went 3 more units in the negative direction, and we end up at negative 5. Let's remember this example for later also. Once again, we have addition going on with our integers, where I have a positive 4 plus a negative 6. And as we recall from the previous 2 examples, is that when you add, you go in the direction of the sign. So I always start at 0, my origin, and I'm going to go 4 units in the positive direction. And then to that I add a negative 6, so I go 6 units in the negative direction. So positive 4 plus negative 6. Start here at 0, 4 units in the positive direction. 1, 2, 3, 4. And to that I add a negative 6. So I end up over here, there's 4 units in the negative direction, 5 units, 6 units in the negative direction. I end up over here at a negative 2. So positive 4 plus a negative 6 is negative 2 because I move in the direction of the sign. 4 units and then 6 units in the negative direction. Okay, and here we go with one more example. Now this time we have a negative 6 plus a positive 9. And again, we move in the direction of the signs, a negative and our positive. And also we start at 0, our origin. So starting at 0 to 0, we're adding negative 6. So we go 6 units in the negative direction to negative 6. And then to that we're adding the positive 9. So we go 9 units in the positive direction. We're going to go 9 units, but I'm going to stop for a second and explain something to you. Right about there, that's 6 units in the positive direction, and I'm back at 0. Because, as a side note, negative 6 plus a positive 6 equals 0. That completes the definition for opposites. We'll go over that in a minute. I'll review that definition, adding this one interesting fact. Okay, so we were at negative 6. We're adding positive 9. Well, positive 6 got us back to 0, 7, 8, 9 units. and we end up at a positive 3. So a negative 6 plus a positive 9 equals a positive 3. Okay, and we also want to remember this example for the next item. But before we go any further, let's look at this negative 6 plus positive 6 equals 0. Because as we know, those are opposites, negative 6 and positive 6. Okay, and the thing about opposites are, first of all, they are the same distance away from 0. So there's our negative 6, 6 units away. There's our positive 6, also 6 units away. They're in opposite directions from 0. And the final part of the definition, which we didn't cover before, is that their sum is 0. So any two opposites, when you add them, your sum is 0. Because that completes the definition for opposites. Now let's wrap up this whole idea of adding integers and see if we can't come up with universal rules that we can use all the time that we add integers. Here we have our 4 examples. Now we're going to see if we can't come up with some universal rules, or the rules that we use to add integers. Because adding integers on the number line is good when your integers are small, but they're not very practical when you to add integers on the number line. When you're adding larger integers that have a greater absolute value, it doesn't make sense to try to add a positive 52 and have your number line have to come out to 52 somewhere, or a negative 73 and have to go in the other direction 73 units. So adding number lines are good, but they're not always practical. So let's see if we can't come up with the rules for adding integers. First of all, if you look here, our integers that we add have the same signs. Positive plus a positive, and we get a positive. Negative plus a negative, and we got a negative. And we already know that 3 plus 5 is 8. And we already know that 2 plus 3 is 5. 2 and 3 being the absolute values of negative 2 and negative 3. So when you add integers with the same sign, you're going to add their absolute values, and then you're going to keep the sign the same. So a positive with a positive gets you a positive, and a negative plus a negative will get you a negative. And then we have these other 2 examples. It's positive 4 plus negative 6, and we get a negative 2. So here we have a positive and a negative, and we get a negative. Here we have a negative 6 plus a positive 9, and we get a positive 3. So now we're adding integers of different signs, and we're getting positive. Where here we added integers of different signs, and we got negative. But if we look at their absolute values again, so if we look at the absolute value of 4 and the absolute value of 6, well, their difference is 2. The difference between 6 and 4 is 2. And the negative comes from, well, negative 6 is further from 0 than positive 4, so our answer is going to be negative. And in this example here, we have a negative 6 and a positive 9. Well, their absolute values of 6 and 9, their difference is 3. 9 minus 6 is 3. And the positive comes from the positive 9, because positive 9 is further from 0 than our negative 6. So the rule for adding integers with different signs. So when you add integers of different signs, what you need to do is you're going to take the difference, or find the difference of their absolute values. Okay? And then you keep the sign, so your sum will have the sign of the number further from 0. The number with the larger absolute values. So when adding integers of different signs, you subtract their absolute values, and then you keep the sign of the number which is further away from 0, the larger absolute value. So 2 additional examples using our new rules negative 17 plus a negative 41. Well, we're going to add the absolute values of the integers, and we're going to keep the sign the same. So 17 plus 41, the absolute value of negative 17 is 17. The absolute value of negative 41 is 41. So I add their absolute values, 17 plus 41, and I get a 58. And I'm going to keep it negative. If I imagine on the number line, I go negative 17 units, and to that I add a negative 41, so I keep going in the negative direction. So I'm going to end up at a negative 58. Another example, let's try a negative 45 plus a positive 21. Okay, now I have two integers of different signs. I have a negative adding with a positive. So I'm going to find the difference of the absolute values, and then I'll keep the sign of the number further from 0, the one with the larger absolute value. So the difference between their absolute values, the difference between 45 and 21 is 24. Their difference is 24. And since negative 45 is further from 0, our answer is a negative 24. So the sum of adding negative 45 plus a positive 21 equals a negative 24. So there's number lines and the rules for adding integers. Again, with the same sign, add the absolute values, keep the sign. Adding integers with different signs, subtract or find the difference of their absolute values, and then keep the sign of the number further from 0.